Welcome to Conscious Marketing Movement Podcast, where we bring you thought-provoking conversations to challenge traditional marketing practices and inspire a new paradigm, shaping the future of marketing for a better tomorrow. In our first season, we'll explore how can marketing drive climate action. We'll be talking with sustainability communicators, brand strategists, designers, all sharing their knowledge and first-hand experiences. So whether you're listening to us at home with your favorite beverage or on your daily commute, make yourself comfortable and enjoy the episode. Traditional marketing focused on profits at all costs has driven social and environmental systems to the brink of collapse. And it's time to fix this, says Alexis Eyre, sustainable marketing expert, author, and co-founder of Sustainable Marketing Compass. Welcome, Alexis. Thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. I look forward to it.
Today, I really want to focus and kind of define what sustainable marketing is. I think there's a lot of confusion there. There's so many definitions: green marketing, eco-marketing, sustainable marketing. So I really hope by the end of this episode, our listeners will have a clearer idea of what sustainable marketing is. But before we go into that, I would like to hear a little bit about your story. I know that you worked at all sides of marketing, triangle, as you say, from client side to agency side, media owner side. So what was the moment that led you to change and study sustainability at Cambridge University Institute?
It was an interesting journey. It actually started in 2018 when I quit my job at Sunsil, and I decided, partly because I was just like, I didn't want to work full time in the marine industry any longer. I love the marine industry to pieces, but I wanted to have some other industry experience, which I hadn't had for a while because I'd been in the marine industry for a few years at that point. And I was sailing across the Atlantic, and I couldn't get over just how much plastic there was everywhere. It was like Blue Planet 2, and I saw about 10, 20 times more plastic than I saw wildlife. And I think it was probably when I was about 1,000 miles from land when a plastic chair came floating past. And I was like, how have we got to this? And it really impacted me. And I sort of came back, landed on land, and I was like, whatever I do, I've got to find a way to have a job that actually drives change and stops this ridiculous human negative impact that we're having on our amazing planet. And then so I sort of started with 5x5, the creative agency. But when I was there, I was sort of looking for sustainability sort of courses so I could start learning about what sustainability was and everything around that. And actually, it was someone else from, bizarrely, within the marine industry who said to me, I've just done this amazing 8-week course. It's pretty intense. It is fairly hardcore on top of a job, but it's only 8 weeks. And so therefore, it is manageable to some extent. And it was the Business Sustainability Management course by the Cambridge Institute of Sustainability Leadership, which is one of the arms of Cambridge University. And it blew my mind. I wasn't prepared for it, but it was the best course I've ever done. And I think it gives you a really holistic, systemic view on what sustainability is and what the levers are that you can play around the world to drive change. I think it was really important, coming way out of marketing, coming way out of the function and everything else, and actually sort of looking at what all the drivers are that are going to drive change. So you've got obviously policy, you've got the role of business within that, you've got the role of insurance, which is often missed and a monumental part in that. You've got the role of partnerships and the role of finance. Those are sort of the big ones that sort of kind of come out of that, and how important all those levers are in terms of driving change. Obviously, I sit in business, so that's where I look to make change. And I got to the end of the course, and then I looked back at marketing and I was like, marketing has just got it so wrong. And I even felt that on the course, like the network you get from it is just through the roof. I mean, we were there with like board members of AstraZeneca and Mercedes, and then you were the whole way down to sort of like, PAs who were just fascinated by it, and office assistants who just starting off in their entire career. So it was so wonderful. It was so eclectic. It was so global. People from everywhere were doing it. So many different languages, so much different experience. And it was a brilliant course. And I got to the end, and I just felt completely disillusioned by it all. And the amount of people that we met were just like, oh, you're part of the problem. Like, marketing is one of the biggest drivers of consumption. I said to one of the professors, I said, I think I'm gonna quit marketing. I think I need to go down a different route. I can't see how I can stay in it knowing what I know now. He said, you can't. He said, you know marketing better than anyone else, stay in marketing, but just make sure that you make it become a force for good. And that's basically the route I took. It became a fairly almighty northern star for me. It just became such a massive guiding light for me. And I met Paul Randall there, who I wrote the book with and I've done so much work with, and he's just some people call him my sustainable marketing husband. It is just, it's been an absolute whirlwind of a journey. But I think I think the biggest learning when I see it time and time again is that everyone has that downtrodden feeling working marketing when you suddenly start to understand marketing's impacts and how complicit it is with today's challenges. And I'm with you, but don't give up. You can, I think that's the biggest thing, is just work out how you can change marketing. Don't leave it, because marketing's huge behaviour changing capability and ability to be some of the most effective communicators in the world. And so we need all that skill sets to come to the table, but we just need to point it all in the right direction.
Yeah, very well said. I'm definitely one of those people who decided to quit marketing years ago, almost like 13 years ago now, of similar reasons. And now I'm back with the same question. How can we do this differently? And it feels sometimes overwhelming. Where do you start, especially as a freelancer? But here we are. Things are happening. More and more people, I think, uniting around this common purpose. So that's really inspiring. With your book, Sustainable Marketing, you lay out a new strategic foundation for the field. Why did you choose to write a book? What inspired you to write it?
Do you know what? It actually came off the back of that course, and I met Paul there, and we both knew we had to stay in it after our professor told us that. But before we started on anything and finding solutions, we were like, we need to research the industry and find out what's going on, where there are problems and where there are solutions. So we sort of start to get a full understanding of the landscape that's out there. And we just chatted to so many people. We read so much literature. And it was just absolutely brilliant. And we met the most wonderful people. And we realised there's actually so many pockets of amazingness going on. But the one gap that we really sort of saw was that there was nothing that pinned it all together. Not everyone has 2 years like Paul and I do to do something like that. And that was in the height of COVID, which is probably why we had slightly more time than the most, the most periods of our lives. And so that's where the Sustainable Marketing Compass, our strategic platform, our strategic model came out from, was actually like, how could we produce something that could be a guide for marketers that takes them on the entire journey from aligning with their company's sustainability strategy or aligning with a sustainability framework, and then embedding sustainability into every single aspect of their marketing, from branding and strategy through to tactics, governance, performance, metrics. And what would that look like? And that's really where the Sustainable Marketing Compass came from. And when we actually produced it, we were like, what do we do with it now? We could use it on a few clients, brilliant. But actually, it's only 6 years until 2030. Actually, less really.
Oh God, it is. I didn't think about it that way. Oh God.
But, sort of 5 years until 2030,
Yeah.
which is where a lot of these goals have been set for, to have achieved lots of things. And we were like, us working on a few clients isn't going to change things. I mean, it's wonderful if we can drive a bit of change in one or two companies, but actually, if we really want to drive change, we need to get this out. So we decided to open source the framework, and the day that we launched it, we hit send or post on LinkedIn, and within 24 hours, 750,000 people have seen it, and it went absolutely mental. I don't think we were expecting what came out of it. I mean, it was just We had sustainability people coming to us. Finally, thank goodness you brought this out. Finally, we can give marketing some focus and know what to do with them because they're like the problem child. Or we had marketing people who were disenfranchised with the sector, didn't know where to turn, and finally had some kind of guiding light of where they could look to change. And it was just amazing to see, the sort of like response to it. And actually now it's embedded in loads of education institutions. The likes of Cambridge Institute of Sustainability Leadership. We helped advise them on their sustainable marketing, media, and creative course, and it's in there. And we've worked with MIT and Bournemouth and loads of different, and CIM and the IPA, and it's a real mixture of stuff that we've sort of built that framework into, which is brilliant. And then it was about 6 months after we pressed post that Kogan Page got in touch and said, would you be interested in writing a book using the compass as obviously the core focus of it, but actually building it out into 90,000 words, which at the time was terrifying. But then it turns out, actually, we had so much to write about. And we were so lucky. We already knew everything that was going to go into the book. I mean, we just had so much data and resource to put in there. The book came out, and I think it really added the depth of thinking that was missing. And it solidified our thinking because obviously once it's on paper, it can't change. And so it really made us go deeper than we'd ever gone beforehand in truly pinning down what we needed to put in place that was currently missing certain things, or where we'd seen gaps and how we'd overcome them.
I love it. I've been reading it for the last 2 weeks and just underlying almost every second sentence with a pencil, really trying to understand the framework. Can you maybe explain to us, I know it's an extensive framework, but just kind of the foundations of it?
No, absolutely. So, I mean, you can actually dive into the compass at any point, really. Ideally, if you want to do it really properly, you start at the centre, and that's aligning with a company's sustainability objectives. Quite often, we have been in a meeting room and actually introduced the marketing people to their sustainability teams, which is the most extraordinary place to be when you're like, you work for the same company, and I've met most parties before you've met each other. I think what's happening at the moment is marketing is massively working against sustainability. You've got marketing doing growth, commercial growth no matter what, and then you've got these sustainability teams or sustainability focus, or even if you've got one member working on it, every structure is different, trying desperately to drive positive environmental societal impact. And quite often when you put them all on the same table, you realise that commercial is working actually completely against the environmental societal targets. The first core thing is, let's get all of those performance metrics on the table, those what the KPIs are, metrics for success across both areas. And let's find a common language and a common goal that means that we all work towards metrics on all three sides. Once you've lined everything else up, it's redefining what success looks like for marketing going forward. Moving away from that commercial focus and really focusing on how do we drive performance, and almost move away from being a sole driver of growth to sort of an orchestrator of performance, across commercial, environmental, and societal targets, always making sure that all of them are being considered all the time. But I think also that at this stage, it's really understanding what are the links between commercial and society at the moment? What are links between societal and environmental? And what are the links between environmental and commercial? And I think that's really fundamental to understand the way your products might be set up at the moment. It might be that the more products you sell, the more carbon you're emitting. So what kind of solutions could you put in place that reduces the carbon footprint while you're still able to sell your products? So that's the first major strategic foundation. So you start with the central alignment with sustainability, and then you move on to the 4 strategic foundations. So redefine success is the first one. It's like, what does success look like across all 3 pillars? The next one is really looking at your entire value chain and saying, where can we drive additional impact through our entire value chain? There are 3 core areas that you can really rethink value and how you create new value that is beneficial to everyone and the environment. There's one around products and services. So how can you rethink the products and services that you currently have so that they drive more value? A really simple example is everyone's obsession with planting a tree for every pair of pants you sell. But actually, if you really want something that's much more integrated than that, then you need to probably look at the products themselves and have a much more holistic look at where the challenges are and how your products can help drive change within those challenges. The second one is around looking at your value chain. A really good example of this is Tony's Chocolonely. So they basically use their pricing strategy to charge more for chocolate, which means that they can actually pay their farmers in the cocoa industry in the Ivory Coast. So they can pay them more money per hour or per product, whatever their pricing structure is based on, so that their children don't have to work to earn money to keep the family alive as well. Therefore, children can go off to school. You're increasing the education within the local society, and you're removing slave labour, child slave labour at the same time. So everyone is benefiting from that. So you're creating this entire new value set in your chain by using pricing strategies as part of the way to create new value. And then the final one is around industry clusters, and it's saying, we have a problem as an industry. How do we fix it? And what are the partnerships we need to put in place so that we pre-competitively start driving change? A secretariat tried to do this. It was set up by the amazing Nazneen, who is one of the board members of AstraZeneca. And she said there are a lot of things within global pharma that there's no competitive advantage achieved through some of the big global problems, because unless all the actors come together, we're never going to actually drive change. She created this secretariat called UMaker, and they picked out the biggest problems within pharma that they can say pre-competitively, if we sort all of this out with the actors, we will collectively be making a difference. The third one is around real people, and that's really moving marketing away from being this obsession with targeting people and treating people as numbers and data. And actually, we looked into the healthcare industry around what they do, and they've got this eight ladder process around how you apply duty of care to ensure that you are looking at all areas of that person around them to fully understand what their situation is and what you should actually be doing for them. So I think moving away from you are a target to you are a citizen is a huge mindset shift for the marketing industry, but fundamental if we are going to reconfigure what we look at. And then the final one is around governance and efficiencies. And everyone is always obsessed at looking at traditional marketing viewers. Okay, how can I get it up to 20%? What do I need to do to get to 20% open rate? No one ever considers actually 19% success rate means that 81% of my database haven't even opened my email and they haven't even looked at it. And considering that I think it's about 50 grams. If you have an email with one image in it, it's 50 grams of carbon for every email sent. Now start to work out how big your database is. So you're sending out that many emails, calculate the amount of carbon that's released, and then think about the 81% who don't even open it. So you've released all this carbon. I think we really need to add that sort of, like I call it, the opposite rate, look at the opposite rate and actually look at it from a completely different angle and actually say, what can we do? And then I think governance is going to be monumental. What governance needs to be put in place that we're already checking. We're always checking ourselves against societal and environmental impacts as well as commercial. So, what diversity metrics do we need to put, or parameters do we need to put in place to ensure that diversity is always, or DEI is always being looked at? What do we need to put in place to ensure carbon is minimised? I mean, there's all these things, and I think it is quite complex, the new system, and what those governance metrics are going to be way more complicated or complex than what we previously have, because obviously we're working across 3 dimensions, but it's really fundamental to have those in place to ensure that accountability is always operating across those 3 pillars. And then finally, you move out to the activation area, and that is really how, now you've got your strategic foundations in place, how do you start bringing it to life? And the first one is around purpose, and that sits between redefined success and where your value is being created. So it's what actually is your purpose based on your sustainability alignment, where you're trying to drive success, where your business strengths are, and where your value is that you're trying to create. And that sits at an organizational level. It's not a brand level, it is an organizational level. So that consideration needs to take in so much of what you do organizationally if you're going to truly bring that to life. So that's really fundamental. And then you've got partnership, and that's really saying, and that's really getting people to say, how are you working in partnership with your stakeholders, your customers, other trade bodies, regulators? How do we form symbiotic relationships that have a common shared goal? That came truly from all of our sustainability work, is they There's none of this us and them. It's how do we work together? So that's really fundamental. And especially in the customer set, do people ever think about communities rather than individuals, and look at what the communities need, and how can you answer those community needs? And I'm not talking about desires. I'm not talking about whether someone needs a new hairdryer. I'm talking about like fundamental physical needs. And how can they be answered with your new value, your shared value? And the one that all the agencies always jump on board first is like participation. How do we participate in the market? Tell us how to do it. It's a really difficult one to come into if you haven't considered the rest. It's probably the hardest of all of them, because unless you've got the core foundations in place, it's really hard to start setting the parameters for how you participate in the market. When we were actually looking at all the, how we participate generally in the market to start with, it's always like channel first. What can we do in social media? What can we do in this? It's never, we really need, our innovation is just appalling as an industry. And especially if you look at the last 30 years, it's actually our innovation, our creativity has gone massively downhill, and it just all feels the same. We actually think, we were working with some design system thinkers, and actually, design system thinking is fascinating. It gets you to zoom out of your industry. It gets you to zoom out of all industries and maybe look at completely other areas. You could even look at be biophilic and look at, and at nature for inspiration, or you could look at, you could geology. I mean, you could literally look at anything for inspiration and start to get these real moonshot ideas that we just haven't seen for decades. Is those really innovative, different approaches coming in? So the kind of things that we've got quite a few questions in the book, but it's like, how would you still achieve a 100 grand target commercially, but without spending a single penny on marketing budget? And we're starting to see some of those parameters being put in place. It's really fascinating. I think we need that injection of questions like that to get you thinking completely outside the box. And then the final one is performance metrics. So how do you actually prove that you're driving performance is going to be fundamental. And I think there are loads of metrics that still need to be worked out. Do you do lead per cubic meter of water used? Do you do amount of carbon used per lead, or whatever it is? I think we're just at the starting stages of this, and although we know it's absolutely fundamental, we don't have all the answers. We don't know what all those metrics are, and I know some companies are starting to play around with them. They're really exciting, some of the stuff that we're starting to see. And then the final thing is that everything that you do is underpinned by data, so you've got proof of concept. Obviously using data sets in a very efficient way, so not capturing data you don't need, which obviously marketing renders that, and then testing it and always having that governance structure in place so that whenever you're deciding upon anything, you always have that 3-pillar lens, and you're always saying what we're about to decide on, what's our impact environmentally, society and commercially. And if you're hitting 2 but not the 3rd, then you have to go back to the drawing board until you're happy that positive impact is being driven across all 3 areas. That you can't go on, otherwise it will backfire massively in the future. Hopefully might give a bit of a insight into that model and how it does it different to how we currently approach marketing.
It's very different. I feel my brain changing when I listen to you. It is a mindset shift, and it's completely, and it's so inspiring because it's not looking so much. I mean, you go really right in the detail, and it is complex. And as you say, we're just at the beginning of it. But what I find it really inspiring that it zooms out also at the bigger perspective. What is the well-being economy? And you provide the actual framework for it. And also for us marketers, give hope that, you're not to drive just the commercial success. There is this whole other purpose. To support communities, to look after the planet, to prepare for the next 7 generations, leave the habitable, nice, lovely earth for them to live on. So I really feel it just makes you look at the whole industry from completely different point of view, that you're not just this one, as you say, also in the book, that you don't only work with your sales department, but marketing is everything. It has the very big seat at the table, also with the board, and deciding those, what is our purpose. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Alexis. now, just to play a little bit of a devil's advocate, I love doing that. How open the companies are at the moment to this framework, and what do you think we need to open more doors for people to accept this framework, to accept this sort of thinking?
It's really interesting. I'll tell you where we're really starting to see change is when some of the agencies are adopting it. And by the very nature of them adopting it, by the very nature of their teams understanding it, and because marketing teams come to agencies for help and guidance. If you've got an agency that understands it and is embedding it in their very thinking, and they've made up their own proprietary, version of it, that's where we're actually seeing the biggest shift from that perspective. Having said that, we are seeing companies start to be slammed by competitors who are completely overriding them on the sustainability front. And so they are just out there trying to find solutions. I think the very nature of this has started to spark interest from that perspective, because it does show the depth of thinking that's probably required to become competitive against their competitors again. But yes, it is getting there. And I feel actually in the last 6 months, it's suddenly just gone a little bit mental. There's been so much regulation and policy that's landed. If you were to print off all the legislation landing this year alone, just in 2024, it would be 10 stories high. Like, that is how much environmental legislation is landing at the moment. And procurement's really latching onto that and then asking all of their suppliers, well, what are you doing about all these areas? And so suddenly what we're finding, especially in the big B2B market, is that the competitive field has suddenly been moved to the procurement stage and where all the tender documents are lying, because all these companies are like, oh, so we're doing this. Well, actually, marketing teams aren't always even sure what their companies are doing anyway. But how does that differ to what other competitors are doing? So that we know how to commercially win against them. And, these are multi-billion-dollar contracts. These aren't like just, a few £100s here and there. These are absolutely monumental. And so it's been fascinating to see that. And so that has also been a massive driver for the conversations around the model and everything else. It's like we are being slammed left, right and centre because as legislation's come down, we don't understand it. We don't understand where we sit versus our competitors. And we're losing contracts because of it. And I think they're starting to realise that communicating companies' sustainability plans is not going to get them to win the contracts. They need to rethink entire value propositions to align with some of these things. And the NHS is extraordinary from a UK perspective because it is actually unbelievably ambitious and it is pulling all of its supply chain with it. And it is just amazing seeing what's coming out. Like 76% of their plastic by 2026 needs to be regenerated or something like that. And they've got such ambitious net zero targets that all their supply chain has to come with. So it's really interesting. And I think, the model only plays one part of it. It's, but I think they're starting to understand what role it plays within the wider context.
And for a marketer, because we in Conscious Marketing Movement, we mainly freelancers, solo entrepreneurs, raising these questions. And so if someone from our community or from a wider community wants to learn a sustainable marketing framework, where do we go? Do you offer any trainings, or apart from the book, is there anything else?
There is a huge amount of information on sustainablemarketingcampus.com. It's all open source. We're planning to add a lot more to it. I think the book probably gives the best, so probably more in-depth view of that. And we are looking longer term at whether we can create like a community where people can chat to each other around what they're doing. We really love what the Kate Rower's done with the Donut Economics and her Donut Economics Action Lab, and whether we can create something similar where communities of different people can actually chat about their challenges and how they're embedding it within their own, scenarios and everything else would be just amazing to get to that stage. So yes, lots of plans in place, but in the meantime, I'd say the book and the website is probably the best place. And if you've got a random question, do get in touch. You can always find me on LinkedIn and or Paul on LinkedIn and just find us and ask a question. That's absolutely fine. We'd love to hear from you.
No, the book in itself, I think you can study it for quite a long time. So that's a wonderful resource to start with. But we know, just for the end, Alexis, I'd like to know this change-making role that we take on. It's definitely not an easy one. What keeps you going every day?
I think it's just every single time just one person suddenly twigging what's actually the change required, or just one more person understands it. And the more influential they are, the more excited I get. But when you get people from the media, people who have real influence over the industry, and they suddenly start to understand actually the scale of change and start to use their voice to show, that for me is huge, because I'm like, Paul and I can't do it alone, and also the other actors in this space can't do it alone. We're such a small group of people. The more we get of those people on board, the faster I see this industry change. That's my absolute driver. It's like, okay, who's next? Who's our next on our hit list? Who's the next set of people that we need to get thinking differently?
Wonderful. Thank you so much for all the wonderful work that you're doing. I think, it's just the beginning, and the framework is an amazing place to start having that kind of both perspectives, the grand perspective and changing the mindset, and also getting in the nitty-gritty of things and really challenging the whole marketing industry and changing it for good. So thank you so much, Alexis, and wish you all the best. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. And if you would like to learn more about what is conscious marketing and join a community of entrepreneurs and change makers, marketers, head to consciousmarketingmovement.com and join the membership.